Formula One just pulled off one of the most shocking reversals in its history. They killed their biggest technical idea after only 4 races. The 50-50 engine concept, gone. Replaced by a 60-40 split that completely shifts power back to combustion, and away from electric energy. And the reason is brutal. Cars were losing half their power in seconds. Speed gaps hitting up to 50 kilometers per hour, on the same straight. That's not a small issue. That's a system failure. And now, with one decision, the FIA just flipped the entire competitive order. Some teams just lost their biggest advantage overnight. Others just became contenders without changing a single part. So the real question is no longer why the 50-50 era is over. It's who just won the future of Formula One because of it. To understand why this decision feels so extreme, you have to go back to what the 50-50 concept was supposed to represent, because this wasn't just another rule. It was the future of Formula One. Half combustion, half electric. A perfect balance between power and efficiency. A vision where the sport didn't just race, it evolved. That was the promise. A new era where technology from the track could shape the real world. Cleaner, smarter, more advanced. And for a moment, it looked like the right direction. 2 systems working together. One delivering constant power, the other adding explosive bursts when needed. Like having 2 engines sharing the same responsibility. But here's where the idea started to fall apart. Because that balance never truly existed on track. The electric side wasn't stable. It was aggressive, short-lived, and incredibly sensitive. Imagine sprinting at full speed, then suddenly losing half your strength in the middle of the run. No warning, no control, just gone. That's exactly what drivers were dealing with. The battery would deliver massive power for a few seconds, and then completely drop off. And the moment that happened, the car changed instantly. Not slightly. Drastically. Half the performance, disappearing in seconds. But the real problem wasn't just losing power. It was what happened when another car still had it. Because Formula One is never about driving alone. It's about fighting someone else, at the exact same moment. If one driver had full battery, and the other didn't, the difference wasn't small. It was massive. We're talking about speed gaps that could reach up to 50 kilometers per hour on the same straight. Same track. Same conditions. Completely different performance. And that's where the system crossed a line. Because this wasn't just making racing difficult. It was making it unpredictable. Drivers couldn't rely on consistent power. They couldn't judge overtakes the same way. They couldn't even trust what would happen from one second to the next. And when control disappears in a sport built on precision, everything starts to break. But here's the key detail that forced the FIA to act. This wasn't a rare issue. It was happening constantly. Lap after lap. Race after race. The battery drains. The power drops. The car slows. Another car flies past. Then it happens again, in reverse. Over and over. And suddenly, racing becomes less about skill, and more about energy timing. That's not what Formula One is supposed to be. So the FIA tried to fix it. Small changes. Software adjustments. Energy management tweaks. But those fixes barely scratched the surface. They solved around 20% of the problem, leaving the majority untouched. And that's the moment everything changed. Because once you realize the problem is built into the system itself, there's no tuning it. There's no adjusting it. There's only one option left. You replace it. And that's exactly what they did. But what they replaced it with is where the real story begins. And this is where everything flips, because the moment the FIA introduced the 60-40 split, they didn't just fix a problem. They changed the DNA of the car. More power now comes from the combustion engine. Less from the electric system. And that single shift immediately reduces the biggest weakness of the old concept. Because now, when the battery runs out, the loss isn't catastrophic. You don't lose half the car anymore. You lose less. Enough to feel it, but not enough to completely destroy your pace. And that changes everything on track. Those extreme speed differences, the ones reaching up to 50 kilometers per hour, start to shrink into something drivers can actually manage. The car becomes predictable again. More stable. More consistent. And most importantly, more controllable. But here's where it gets interesting. Because the total power of the car doesn't change. It stays almost exactly the same. What changes is how that power is delivered. The combustion engine gains around 50 kilowatts. The electric system loses around 50 kilowatts. Same total output. Completely different balance. Think of it like moving weight inside a car. You don't change how heavy it is, but you completely change how it feels to drive. And in Formula One, that feeling is everything. Because teams didn't just build engines. They built entire philosophies around that 50-50 balance. cooling systems designed for heavy electrical demand, software built to manage energy with extreme precision, strategies based on when to deploy battery and when to hold back. All of that now becomes less important, or at least less dominant. And that's where the tension starts to rise. Because some teams mastered that system. They built their entire advantage around the electric side. Years of data, thousands of simulations, endless fine-tuning. And now, that advantage shrinks. Not completely gone, but reduced enough to matter. While at the same time, other teams gained something they didn't have before. Because they were never dominant on the electric side. They struggled with energy deployment, battery efficiency, consistency. But they were stronger in combustion, more stable, more predictable. And now, that part of the engine matters more. Which means they close the gap, without even upgrading anything yet. And that's why the reaction across the paddock isn't just frustration. It's urgency. Because this isn't a small adjustment. It's a redistribution of strengths. A shift that rewards some approaches, and punishes others. But it goes even further. Because this change forces every team to rethink the entire car. More combustion power means more heat. More heat means new cooling solutions. Increased fuel flow means changes in fuel systems, even fuel tank size. Weight distribution shifts. Balance changes. Race strategy evolves. And at the same time, the electric system becomes less dominant. Which means the entire energy management philosophy has to be rewritten. From scratch. This isn't an update. It's a rebuild. And it all comes from one brutal realization. The original idea didn't survive real racing. But here's the part that makes this even bigger. Because while some teams are scrambling to adapt, others are already perfectly aligned with this new direction. And that's where the real shift begins. And this is where the story becomes even more uncomfortable, because once you look at the grid closely, you start to realize something dangerous. Not everyone is starting from zero. Some teams are already exactly where this new era is heading. Because while the spotlight has been on electric performance, on energy deployment, on battery efficiency, a few manufacturers never fully relied on it. They built engines that were stronger in combustion, more consistent, more stable under pressure, and under the 50-50 system, that looked like a weakness. They were losing time in short bursts, struggling to match peak performance, always slightly behind when the battery was fully deployed. But now, that entire context changes. Because the part where they were weaker matters less. And the part where they were stronger becomes the foundation of the car. That's not an improvement. That's a shift in relevance. And it happens instantly. Before any upgrades. Before any redesigns. Before any development even begins. And this is exactly why teams are reacting the way they are. Because they understand something the outside world doesn't see yet. This isn't just about adapting. It's about how much you have to change to survive. Some teams now face a complete rebuild. Their entire philosophy, centered around maximizing the electric system, now partially obsolete. Their data, less valuable. Their simulations, less accurate. Their strengths, reduced. And in Formula One, rebuilding is not quick. It takes time. Time they don't have. Because while they're trying to adjust, others are already refining. Already optimizing. Already moving forward. And that creates a gap. Not visible yet. But growing. Quietly. And this is where the real danger appears. Because dominance in Formula One doesn't come from one big breakthrough. It comes from alignment. When engine, aerodynamics, cooling, and strategy all move in the same direction. And right now, the rules just changed that direction. Which means the teams that were already aligned are about to accelerate, while the others are forced to turn. And that's always where time is lost. But there's another layer that makes this even more intense. Because this shift doesn't just affect performance. It affects development strategy. The questions teams are asking right now are completely different. Do you invest in fixing what no longer matters as much? Or do you abandon it and start over? Do you protect your current advantage? Or sacrifice it to build something for the future? Those decisions define entire seasons. And sometimes, entire eras. And this is why the paddock reaction isn't just frustration. It's tension. Because everyone understands what's at stake. This isn't about one regulation. It's about the direction of Formula One itself. And the teams that choose correctly, right now, won't just adapt to the 60-40 era. They'll control it. So when you hear that teams are furious, it's not just because something changed. It's because they know someone else might already be ahead in a race that hasn't even started yet. And this is where everything finally leads, because the real impact of this decision isn't what changes today. It's what becomes inevitable tomorrow. Because right now, while most teams are reacting, adjusting, questioning everything they built, A smaller group is already moving in a straight line. They don't need to rethink their entire concept. They don't need to abandon years of development. They just need to push further in the same direction. And that difference is everything. Because in Formula One, momentum is invisible at first. You don't see it in one race. You don't see it in one upgrade. But over time, it compounds. Small gains become bigger ones. Consistency turns into dominance. And by the time it's obvious, it's already too late to stop. That's exactly what this 60-40 shift creates. A silent advantage. A head start that doesn't look dramatic, but grows with every decision made correctly. Because now, the entire sport is moving toward a philosophy that favors stability over bursts, sustained power over short peaks, control over unpredictability. And the teams that were already thinking that way are now perfectly aligned with the future. But here's where the situation becomes even more intense. Because this change doesn't just affect how fast a car is. It affects how it evolves. More combustion power means different aerodynamic needs, different cooling requirements, different weight distribution. Everything is connected. So if your engine concept fits the new rules, your entire car concept follows more naturally. Less compromise, more efficiency, faster development cycles. And that's how advantages multiply. Not through one big breakthrough, but through everything working together. And this is where the gap truly begins to open. Because while some teams are still solving problems from the past, others are already building solutions for the future. And that time difference becomes performance. But there's one final layer that makes this even more decisive. Because this wasn't just a technical correction. It was an admission. An admission that Formula One pushed too far, too fast. That the balance between electric and combustion wasn't just difficult. It was fundamentally flawed in real racing conditions. And once a sport admits that, it doesn't just adjust. It recalibrates. It chooses a new direction. And that direction now is clear. Less dependency on electric systems. More emphasis on mechanical performance. More control in the hands of the driver. And that clarity is what allows certain teams to move faster than others. Because uncertainty slows you down. But certainty accelerates everything. So now, the teams that understand this shift at the deepest level won't just adapt. They'll build cars that are naturally faster under these conditions. Cars that don't fight the rules, but work with them. And when that happens, the gap is no longer about talent or effort. It's about alignment. And that's the most dangerous advantage in Formula One. Because you can't close it quickly. You can only chase it. So when teams are furious right now, it's not just about losing what they had. It's about realizing what someone else is about to gain. Because this moment, this exact decision, may not just define the next season. It may define the next era of Formula One. And by the time everyone sees who got it right, that team might already be too far ahead to catch.